Caffeine's starting to hit. I'm funny. All the drug references are going to be like, huh, I don't think she's... Hey guys, I've been working all week long trying to decide what to show you how to make this week. And I decided it's fall, it's getting colder. Up in Alaska, it's already snowing. And so we've got to talk about soup this week. However, we got to start at the basics. The base of any great soup is the broth, the stock behind it. And you know what? You can't get it out of a box, a can, or a, let's see, box, can, or jar. You can't get it out of those things because you know what it doesn't have? It has no love. You've got to put love in your broth. That's the most important ingredient. Now, you're saying, oh yeah, that's too hard for me. It's not. I promise. It's so simple. You just make it in your crock pot and set it and forget it. You use all sorts of leftovers. It's totally economical. And it turns out fabulous every single time. You cannot mess this stuff up. Okay, let's get started. So today I'm going to make beef broth because next week I'm going to show you how to make pho soup, the Vietnamese noodle soup. And the beef bones make a really, really rich and flavorful broth. Now that being said, one of my very favorite broths to make is with leftover rotisserie chicken. So we take the meat off when I get the chicken. I take the meat all off, use it for salads or sandwiches or whatever, soups, and I save the bones and the skin and all the sauce and juices that collect at the bottom because they've already spiced it and roasted it. So then I just throw it directly in the crock pot, fill it up with water and the rest of the stuff I'm going to tell you about, and it makes the most fantastic broth. So feel free to, if you have rotisserie chicken around and you don't want to make broth right that day, just throw it in a Ziploc bag in the freezer along with your vegetables and make your broth anytime. But today I have these raw soup bones and I'm going to roast them in the oven before I put them in the stock pot so that it brings out all those delicious, wonderful, smoky flavors. Now, as far as vegetables go, I love to think of my vegetables that I use in my stock pot as compost because normally this is stuff that I would put in my compost bin, right? The peelings from carrots, the ends of the leek that are too tough to eat, the little celery leaves that nobody wants to eat and are perfect for soup. And you can see they're all wilted right now, and that's the end of the green bean. That's because I've put them in the freezer. I keep a Ziploc bag of just various vegetable peelings in my freezer so that whenever I'm ready to make stock, I have an abundance of them. Now, that being said, make sure you do not use cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, cauliflower, kale, stems, anything like that in your broth, as it will make your broth bitter. Let's talk about the ever important herbs and spices that we should consider putting into our broth. Now, number one, bay leaves. Bay leaves are always super important. You don't want to overdo it though, or they can turn your broth bitter. I have thyme and rosemary here, they're still growing fresh in my garden. You can use dried, but fresh really tastes lovely. I especially love thyme and rosemary in my broth. Now, there's all different herbs, obviously, that you can throw in there, so feel free to experiment. I often just go through my spice cabinet and throw in whatever I have. Like here I have some coriander seeds, and I just throw a teaspoon, tablespoon of those in to add a little bit of extra flavor. And then I really like to add peppercorns. So I have these whole peppercorns just from Costco that I use in my pepper mill. And so I just throw some of those in the stock pot as well, and they add a really nice flavor. I want to take the time to tell you about two things that you can add to your broth that really bring up the nutritional value of it. Talk about not getting the love out of a box. You're also not going to get all the nutritional value that you can when you make it yourself. So I learned these tricks from the Weston A. Price Foundation, and number one is the apple cider vinegar. You add about a tablespoon to your broth at the beginning, and it helps to leach out the vitamins and minerals from whatever bones you have in that broth. So if you're just making a vegetable broth, you wouldn't add this. But let's say that I'm making a chicken broth. When I take the chicken bones out, they actually turn into a paste in my hands because all of the good stuff, the calcium and the minerals and all of that wonderful nutrition that's within the bones of the animal leaches out into your soup, and you eat it, you don't taste it, and I promise you're not going to taste the vinegar in there at all. You hate vinegar, add it anyway, because you're not going to taste it, and it's going to up the nutritional value significantly. Now, the second thing that I like to add is Pacific kombu, which is basically a seaweed. And now this one you don't add until the very end, because think of it like a tea bag where you're just going to steep it in the water for about half an hour to an hour. So after your broth is done, maybe it's cooling down, waiting to be put in jars to go in the fridge, or maybe you're about to make another, use it in another soup. You just stick this in the broth and it's going to expand, and it will leach out, again, all those wonderful minerals such as iodine that you can get from things like seaweed that you might not normally eat, but you will not taste, and it does add a nice little kind of salty, briny flavor, just barely, to your stock. And but again, if you're not a fan of fish or seaweed, it won't taste like fish or seaweed at all. It's very gentle, and it really is a lovely flavor. So the bones are all beautifully roasted, and we're going to put it right in the crock pot, cover it up with water, and I usually start mine on high, let it get up to a boil, and then turn it down to low and let it go for 12 to 24. I've even gone as long as 72 hours before, but you're going to get a pretty flavorful, thick broth by then. So I usually like to keep mine around the 12 to 24 hour mark, depending on just what kind of broth I'm going for. Now, one thing you don't want to miss is all of these wonderful juices in the pan. And if my pan isn't still hot enough, I might go put it back in the oven with a little bit of water in it, just to get, see how it's not all coming off, and I want to get all those little bits and pieces, because that's where the flavor is. So I'm going to add a little water to this. Just go stick it back in the oven that's still hot for a few minutes and let it warm it up so I can scrape those off and put them in the pan. Now I'm going to add these vegetables, and a lot of times I have a lot more vegetables than this, but you know what? If you don't have a lot, that's okay. You're still going to get the flavor and the nutritional value out of some. When this is all cooked and ready to go, let's say 24 hours has passed, and you're going to salt your stock or your broth. At first, it tastes terrible. It tastes like dirty dishwater. So you salt it until the flavors come out and it tastes beautiful. And seriously, if it does not taste wonderful, it's because you haven't added enough salt. So I don't want any of you to say, well, I get the sodium-free broth at the store. Well, taste it alone. It tastes like dirty dishwater. You have to add salt to the stock in order to bring out the flavors. It's really important to use filtered water because, our main ingredient here is water in our broth, and if we have it filled with a bunch of chlorine, it can mar the taste a little bit. Oh, this broth smells amazing. It's been cooking for 18 hours now, and I'm going to turn off the heat and add my kombu and let it steep in there for a while. Now, I hope that you will give this recipe a try. It's so simple, it's inexpensive, plus it is going to be the springboard for my Vietnamese noodle soup, also known as pho recipe, that I'm going to show you in an upcoming video that is to die for. You are going to love it. Plus, I have tons of soup recipes over at my website, healthnutnation.com. I'm going to link to some right here below so you can click on them and get right to those soup recipes. So I hope that you'll give this broth recipe a try. Let me know what you think. Let me know what creative combinations you come up with and what your favorite soup is. To your health.